I've never forgotten the first time I met Ilera. It started as many things do these days, with a Facebook message. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to talk to. I had recently moved to a small coastal town in Oregon called Volan's Watch, a place where the fog never quite lifted and the ocean always seemed too loud, like it was trying to whisper something you weren't meant to hear. I was staying in a converted interned apartment above a bait shop, trying to write a novel I didn't really believe in. Late one night, while scrolling through my feed, her profile appeared. Her name was Ilera Vexley, and even her name felt like something out of a story. Her profile photo was magnetic, soft curls, a sharp jawline, and eyes the color of storm glass. Her captions were clever, her photos elegant but natural, sun-dappled forests, books with worn spines, candid smiles that looked too perfect to be staged. What hooked me wasn't just the photos, though. It was how quickly she responded. Within minutes of me liking one of her posts, she messaged me. "Hey Milo, you look like you think too much." I like that. The conversation that followed was fluid, effortless. She knew all my references, from obscure Russian sci-fi novels to 90s horror films. She said she was originally from the Pacific Northwest, but had been living out of state for years. She was back in Oregon to reset, she told me. 3 days later, I asked if she wanted to meet. She agreed immediately, too immediately in hindsight. We decided on the Salt Chapel, a sleepy little cafe near the docks that smelled like driftwood and cinnamon. It was dimly lit, always half empty, and the kind of place where time moved a little slower. The day of the date was overcast, naturally. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat at a corner booth near the window. I wore a navy button-down I hadn't ironed and tried not to look like I'd spent 20 minutes rehearsing what I'd say first. She wasn't there. I assumed she was running late. I ordered a black coffee with a shot of honey and waited. 20 minutes passed. Then I saw her. Except, it wasn't her. A woman stood at the door scanning the room. She waved, and I instinctively waved back, confused. She approached with a wide, almost feverish smile. Her skin was pale, her hair wiry and white, pulled into a tight bun. She wore a dark gray pea coat, frayed at the sleeves. Her eyes, behind thick glasses, were bright but distant. She looked like someone's grandmother, not the woman from the photos. But she walked right up to me. "Milo," she asked. My throat tightened. "Yes, I'm Ilera." I stared at her. She sat across from me without waiting for permission, her smile unwavering. The cafe's light flickered slightly, and for a second, I felt like I was in a different version of my life, one where nothing made sense. "I'm sorry," I said. "You said you're Ilera?" She nodded and reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a phone. She opened the Facebook app and showed me our chat. Same messages, same timestamps. "I used AI to generate the pictures," she said calmly. "I didn't think you'd show up if you saw the real me." I couldn't speak. "I've tried real photos before," she continued. "No one ever replies." My stomach turned. I stood up, unsure whether to yell or leave or just disappear into the fog outside. "That's not okay," I said. "You lied. You made me believe." She tilted her head. "But we did connect. You said it yourself." I walked out. She didn't follow, but as I stepped into the misty street, I heard her voice behind me, calm, almost amused. "You'll come back. They always do." For 3 days, I tried to move past it. I told myself it was just a bizarre encounter, a lonely woman with too much time and a warped sense of intimacy. But something about the way she looked at me kept resurfacing in my mind. That smile, those eyes, and then the messages started again. From another account. This one used a different name, L. Varen. But the tone was unmistakable. "You look tired today. Don't stay up so late. You're still drinking honey in your coffee. Cute. The seagull on your windowsill isn't there by accident." I blocked the account. Another took its place. I stopped going to the cafe. I stopped walking near the docks. But it didn't matter. I began to feel watched. I installed blackout curtains and taped paper over the peephole. I unplugged my router. I deleted Facebook. Still, the notes kept appearing. Slipped under my door. Tucked into my mail slot. Handwritten in precise, looping cursive. One note said, "You were lonely." I just filled the shape of that. One night, I woke up to the sound of the porch boards creaking. It was 2:11 a.m. I lay frozen in bed, listening. Then came a soft tap. Not on the door. On the window. I didn't move. Another tap. Then a whisper. "Milo." I grabbed the fireplace poker from beside my bookshelf and crept toward the window. The fog outside was dense, and the glass was too dirty to see through. I waited. Breath held. Nothing. Then movement. A shadow drifting past the edge of the window frame. I lunged forward and pulled back the curtain. No one. Except, on the window in the condensation, a word had been traced with a finger. Again. I couldn't take it anymore. I booked a short-term rental 40 miles inland in a place called Elbridge Hollow. I packed a single duffel bag and left in the middle of the night without telling anyone. On my third day there, I received a manila envelope. No return address. Inside were printed photos. Dozens of them. All of me. At the cafe. On my porch. Sleeping in bed. One photo showed me reading on the couch. The timestamp on the back was from the day before I met Ilera. I flipped to the last photo. It was from inside my apartment. Shot from the corner of the ceiling. There was no camera up there. At least, not one I had installed. My hands shook as I dropped the photo. Behind it was another note. The truth is, I never left. I decided to go back to Volan's watch. I don't know why. Some broken part of me needed closure. Or maybe I needed to prove to myself that she was just a person and not some shadow stitched into my life. I went back to the cafe. It was closed. A sign on the door read, "Closed indefinitely. Staff missing." I asked around. No one remembered Ilera. They remembered a woman who wore gray and sat in the corner booth every afternoon. But no one could ever recall her face. I broke into the apartment above the bait shop. My own apartment. It was empty. Stripped bare. No sign I'd ever been there. Not even the photo frames I'd left on the kitchen counter. But in the center of the living room floor was a single item. A photo. Of me. Sitting in the cafe. Smiling at someone across the table. There was no one else in the seat across from me. Just the suggestion of a shadow. And written on the back, in that same looping script, "You'll come back. They always do." I've never... My best friend, Ilya, was always trying to set me up. She believed in fate, in chemistry, in those ridiculous zodiac compatibility charts. I humored her most of the time. But when she insisted, that I meet a guy named Corvin she'd recently befriended through her meditation group, I was skeptical. She told me we'd be perfect together, that he was sensitive, wounded, but intensely genuine. That last part should have been a red flag. Still, I agreed to meet him. She arranged the date for a Thursday evening at a quiet restaurant on the outskirts of town, a place called Belgrave's. It was one of those dimly lit bistros with candles on the tables, mismatched antique chairs, and a string quartet playing somewhere in the background that never seemed to stop tuning. Corvin was already seated when I arrived. He stood when he saw me, smiling in a shy, almost grateful way. Tall, lean, with a mop of disheveled dark hair and gray eyes that didn't quite meet mine. His clothes were neat but worn, collar slightly frayed, cuffs faded. "You must be Lyra," he said. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. I nodded. "And you're Corvin?" He smiled again, and we sat. For the first 20 minutes, everything was fine. He asked about my job, graphic design for a publishing house, and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. He was articulate, funny in a self-deprecating way, and he had that quiet listening quality that made you feel like your words had weight. Then, somewhere between the second glass of wine and the arrival of our atres, he mentioned his ex. It was casual at first, a passing remark about how she never liked French food. I ignored it, but then he brought up another ex, then another, each story more detailed than the last. He wasn't just reminiscing, he was unraveling, telling me about one who cheated on him with his roommate, another who left without saying goodbye, one who accused him of being too intense because he kept a journal of everything she said to him during their relationship. I tried to smile, to nod politely, but my appetite was gone. "It's always the same," he said, staring down at his untouched plate. "They say they want honesty, and then they run from it." I shifted in my seat. Maybe they just weren't the right people. He looked up sharply. "No, they were right. I was too much. I cared too much. I didn't know what to say." He laughed softly, like he was in on some private joke. "You're probably thinking, wow, fourth date material, not first." I forced a smile. "A bit." He nodded solemnly. "I get it. You're not the first to say that." I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. Asked if he'd traveled anywhere recently. He told me he hadn't left the state in years. That he didn't like airports. That he used to fly often before his ex, the one named Morel, convinced him that the sky was a place where people left and never came back. I thought he was being metaphorical. But he wasn't. She left during a thunderstorm, he said, looking past me. Packed in the night. Didn't even take her toothbrush. I watched her taxi disappear down the street. I counted the seconds between the lightning and the thunder. Corvin, I said gently, maybe we should talk about something else. He blinked. Of course. Sorry. Sometimes I don't know how much is too much. I nodded, relieved. But then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do you ever feel haunted by people who are still alive? I froze. He smiled, a sad, crooked smile. I do. All the time. Morel, especially. She's in my apartment. Not physically, but in the walls. In the temperature. I'll be washing dishes, and suddenly the room goes cold. Or I'll be halfway through brushing my teeth, and I'll hear her humming behind me. I swallowed. That sounds difficult. He nodded. I don't think she left properly. I think some part of her stayed behind. Most people don't finish things cleanly, you know? They leave pieces of themselves. And we carry them. I was no longer sure if I was on a first date or trapped in a therapy session with a man unraveling in real time. I checked my phone discreetly. An hour and a half had passed. He noticed. You don't have to stay. I know I'm a lot. I hesitated. It's not that. Early meeting tomorrow. He nodded, looking down at his hands. Of course. The waiter brought the check, and I reached for my wallet, but Corvin stopped me. I'll get it, he said. It's the least I can do. I thanked him, stood, and gathered my coat. As we walked out, he turned to me and said quietly, You have kind eyes, but I can tell you're already halfway out the door. I didn't answer. I just gave him a small smile and walked to my car. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, I woke up to a message from an unknown number. You don't have to run. I'm not like them. I blocked the number. 2 days later, another message came. Different number. You looked beautiful under the candlelight. I wish I could show you what I see. I blocked it too. Then the letters started. No return address. Just folded sheets of thick, unlined paper slipped into my mailbox. The first one was a poem, about a woman with moonlight in her veins who doesn't yet realize she's already part of someone else's story. The second letter included a photograph of me, taken through my apartment window. I contacted the police. They took a report, but said there was no direct threat, no law broken. Just someone with bad boundaries, they said. Ilya felt horrible. She tried calling Corvin, but his number was disconnected. She swore she hadn't seen him since the night we met. I bought new curtains, changed my locks, got a security camera installed. It didn't matter. Notes continued arriving. One was taped to my front door. Don't be afraid. I'm just listening. You talk in your sleep. Another came with a small velvet pouch containing a lock of hair. I don't know if it was mine. I didn't want to check. I moved out 6 weeks later. Left the city entirely. Cut contact with everyone except my sister. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I deleted my social media. Changed my name on every account. Silence, finally. Until last week. I was walking home from work in my new city, new name, new apartment, new life, when I passed a bookstore with a small display in the window. A collection of local poetry chapbooks. One was titled, Still Room for Her Ghost. The author was listed as Corvin Black. The cover was a photograph of me, sitting at that restaurant table, candlelight in my eyes. The same night we met. I stood there for a full minute, heart pounding, unable to move. I went inside and flipped through the pages. Each poem was about a woman named Lyra, a woman who smelled of antique pages and spoke in lowercase, a woman who is everywhere now, even in the silence between walls. I bought the book, not because I wanted it, but because I needed to know if he was still watching. And the last page confirmed it. A short poem. 4 lines. No title. She left once, and I let her. She left twice, and I followed. She leaves again, but I'm already there. Behind the glass, inside the wall. I burned the book, but the words are still in my head. And sometimes when I walk past mirrors, I think I see him just behind me. Smiling. Saying nothing. Waiting for me to finish the story. I first stumbled across Caliph on a dating app called Ember, a platform supposedly designed to match people with artistic sensibilities. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to talk to over a drink. After 2 years of living alone in Drowsen Hollow, a city where the rain never seemed to stop and the skyline was permanently gray, I figured a little human contact wouldn't hurt. Her profile caught my eye, not because she was stunning, though she was, but because of the way she framed her photographs. They weren't selfies. They were portraits. Carefully composed, with dim lighting, shadows in the right places, expressions caught mid-thought. She looked like she belonged in an art house film. Vintage coats, chipped nail polish, eyes that always seemed to be watching something just beyond the camera. Her bio read, "I find beauty in stillness and stories in silence." Pretentious? Maybe. Intriguing? Absolutely. We messaged for about a week. She was funny in a dry, offbeat way. Her vocabulary was precise, her grammar meticulous, and her questions always personal, but never invasive. She wanted to know about my childhood, my fears, my favorite textures, actual textures. I told her I liked old velvet and the feeling of pages in worn books. She said she liked the cold sting of camera metal against her palms. I suggested a drink. She agreed immediately. We met at a bar called The Lowlight, a narrow, moody venue tucked between two abandoned storefronts in Drowson's crumbling arts district. The place was lit by antique lamps, with thick velvet curtains and a haze of cigarette fog that clung to the air like a memory. It smelled like bourbon and dust. She was already there when I arrived. Caleth sat in a corner booth, her phone in hand, angling it toward the low candlelight as if trying to capture the flickering shadows on her wine glass. She looked exactly like her photos. Short platinum hair, pale like silver in the dim light. Black turtleneck. A coat draped beside her with an old film camera peeking out of the pocket. "Hi," I said. She looked up and smiled, but didn't stand. She gestured for me to sit across from her. "You're very punctual," she said. "I try." She tilted her head. "You don't know how rare that is." We ordered drinks. The first 20 minutes were easy. We talked about film photography, old music videos, and the way most people only ever see each other through screens. She said she hated selfies but loved candid shots, especially the ones people didn't realize were being taken. I laughed. "You mean like street photography?" "Sort of," she said, "but more intimate, more documentary. I like to capture people in their real moments, the ones they don't mean to share." There was something about the way she said it. Not creepy. Not yet. Just intense. At one point, she asked if she could take a picture of me. "Just one," she said. "For memory's sake." I hesitated. "I'm not really a fan of being photographed." "That's why it matters," she replied, already raising her phone. It was quick, one shutter click, and she smiled like she'd caught something special. I brushed it off, but inside I felt a small flicker of unease. I told myself it was just nerves. After another round of drinks, she asked if we could take a few selfies together. I wasn't big on it, but I figured sure. Why not? 1 or 2 photos wouldn't kill me. She snapped the first one with us smiling. Then another with me sipping my drink. Then one where I was looking away. Then another. And another. Always when I wasn't ready. Always when I wasn't looking. I noticed her switching angles, tilting her phone to frame me from below. From the side. She even leaned across the table at one point to take one from over my shoulder. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked up like she hadn't heard the question. "I'm just trying to get the real you. Not the face you think you have. The one that slips out when you're not performing." I laughed awkwardly. "That's kind of intense for a first date." She shrugged. I like to remember people clearly. Something in her tone made me shiver. I didn't think much of it until 3 nights later. I was scrolling through my social media feed when I saw a tagged photo notification. It was from an account I didn't recognize at focus.in.shadows. The profile had no bio, just a series of grainy black and white photos. Street scenes, people on trains, couples fighting on benches, children crying in back alleys, and then me. My heart skipped. There I was, in that same booth at the Lowlight. The photo was taken from across the bar. I was sipping my drink, eyes cast down. The lighting made the shadows under my eyes deeper, more hollow. I looked, haunted. And then another photo. Me again. This time clearly unaware. I was mid-laugh. My hand blurred from motion. Then another. And another. Each photo more invasive than the last. One was from behind me. The back of my head, with the curve of my neck exposed. She wasn't in any of them. Just me. Alone. Vulnerable. I messaged her immediately. "Why are these on that account?" She replied almost instantly. "You're beautiful when you aren't guarding yourself." I didn't respond. She messaged again. "Do you want me to take them down?" I hesitated. "Yes. Please." "Okay. But I think it's a shame." The photos disappeared within the hour. But that wasn't the end. A week passed. I didn't hear from her again. I assumed that was it. A weird date with someone who got too attached to their camera. I could move on. Then I got the envelope. No return address. Inside was a roll of developed film. I held the negatives up to the light, heart pounding. They were all of me, walking to my car, unlocking my apartment door, sleeping. The last photo froze my blood. It was from the foot of my bed. I was asleep, curled on my side, my mouth slightly open. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. I checked all my locks, my windows. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. But I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up with a knife in my hand, watching the shadows crawl across my walls. I moved apartments, changed my number, deleted my social media. I thought it was over. Until last week. I was walking home from work when I saw a flyer stapled to a telephone pole. It was printed on thick, matte paper. A photo of me, taken from behind as I walked down the street. The caption beneath it read, "He never sees me, but I see all of him." I tore it down, but now I see them everywhere. I met him on a Tuesday. His name was Leor, and he messaged me first. Not with some tired line or a gif, but with a sentence I kept rereading for its strangeness. "You look like the kind of person who knows where to stand in a museum." I didn't respond right away. I screenshotted the message and sent it to my friend Noah with the caption, "Poet or pickpocket?" She replied, "Both." "Meet him. I'm bored." So I did. We arranged to meet at a speakeasy-style bar nestled under an old bookstore, the kind of place where the drinks came in mismatched vintage glasses, and the menus were printed on the backs of old library cards. It was called the Lantern Room, and the lighting was so dim it felt like you were drinking in a memory. He arrived 10 minutes late, but with a smile that made you forgive things. He wore a charcoal pea coat and a scarf twisted like it had been done without a mirror. His hair was dark and slightly damp from the rain. He looked like someone who always had somewhere better to be, but had chosen to be here, just for you. "Zadie?" he asked, brushing a hand through his hair. "Yes," I said, standing up. He stepped forward and kissed me on the cheek. "Sorry I'm late. I got caught in a story I didn't want to leave." "What story?" "A man who forgets his own name and starts remembering other people's lives instead." I laughed. "Is that a book or a metaphor?" He grinned. "Yes." We sat. We ordered drinks. He had an old-fashioned. I had something with rosemary and gin that tasted like a winter garden. He was charming in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. He listened well. He asked thoughtful questions. He told stories that made me lean in without realizing it. One about a trip to Lisbon where he lost his shoes and ended up walking through a cathedral barefoot. Another about a woman he'd met in Paris who claimed she could read a person's future by the way they held their glass. "She said I was meant for brief things," he said, smiling at the memory. "Brief and bright." "Do you believe her?" He looked at me. "I think some people are best remembered in flashes." We talked for 3 hours. When the bill came, he reached into his coat pocket, then frowned. "Oh," he said, checking another pocket. "This is embarrassing. I think I forgot my wallet." My stomach tightened slightly, but I smiled. "It happens." He looked genuinely flustered. "I swear I had it when I left the apartment. Maybe it fell out in the cab." I waved it off. "Don't worry, I've got it." "You sure?" "I can Venmo you." "It's fine." He looked at me like I'd just saved his life. "I owe you. Next round's on me. Or brunch. Or both." We left the bar and stood in the soft drizzle that had started again. He looked up at the sky and sighed. "Rain makes everything feel like a secret," he said. Then he leaned in and kissed me. Gentle. Not rushed. "Text me when you get home," he asked. "I will." He smiled and walked off into the night, hands in his pockets. I got home and realized something was off. My purse was lighter. I opened it and stared. My wallet was gone. I emptied the bag. Checked the pockets. The lining. The floor around the entryway. Nothing. I checked my coat. My pants. The kitchen counter. The bathroom. Gone. My throat tightened. I opened my phone and checked my banking app. There were 3 new charges. One at a liquor store, one at a boutique hotel, and one at a gas station on the other side of town. All within the last hour. I called my bank and froze the card. Reported the theft. They asked if it was a lost card or if I suspected fraud. My mouth tasted like metal when I said, "Fraud." I texted him. "Hey, I think you might have left with my wallet." No response. Another message. "I'm not accusing you, just trying to retrace steps." Still nothing. I called the number from our messages. Disconnected. I went back to the dating app. His profile was gone. No trace. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, stomach in knots. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I filed a police report. The officer at the desk nodded like she'd heard it all before. Pretty common scam, she said. They charm you. Get close. Lift the wallet during a hug or while you're distracted. Then vanish. But he didn't seem like. I stopped myself. They never seem like that. I left the station feeling stupid, angry, violated. Not even because of the money. It was the intimacy he'd created. The illusion. He'd made me feel like I was part of something fleeting and beautiful, when really, I was just a mark. I went through the rest of the week like I was underwater. Then, 3 days later, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was my wallet. Everything was in it, cards, ID, even the $20 I kept hidden in that tiny zip pocket. Nothing missing. Taped to the inside was a note. Typed. I didn't need to keep it. I just wanted to hold something that had touched you. My skin went cold. The font was clean. Serif. Precise. The kind of note you'd expect to find in a museum exhibit. Or a crime scene. I took the wallet back to the police. Showed them the note. They opened the case again. Took fingerprints. Checked the envelope. Nothing. No prints. No trace. I changed the locks. Canceled the cards again. I stopped answering calls from unknown numbers. But the story didn't end there. 2 weeks later, I got a message on Instagram from a profile with no photo and no followers. Do you remember how the gin tasted? I do. I blocked it. A day later, another message from a different account. I found your favorite museum. It's smaller than I expected. I hadn't told him my favorite museum. I hadn't told him much of anything, but I'd posted a photo of it 6 months ago. It was buried deep in my feed, below dozens of others. The caption was a quote from an exhibit about memory. I deleted the post, then the whole account. I told myself it was over. Then my friend Noah called me in a panic. Zadie, someone just tried to follow me home. What? I swear to God, he looked like that guy you went out with. The one from the bar. I only saw his face for a second, but he was standing under the awning across the street, just watching. Are you okay? I ran into a grocery store. He didn't follow me, but I'm freaked out. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. Then I remembered something. The woman in the Paris story. She said I was meant for brief things. That line, it wasn't his. I'd read it before, years ago, in a short story by an obscure writer I used to love. I'd underlined that line in my old journal. I dug the journal out of my closet, flipped through the pages. There it was. Same phrasing. Word for word. I flipped back to the page before it, and there, in the corner, was a name I'd written in the margin. Lior. Not from the story. From a different entry. A guy I'd met at a gallery opening 2 years ago. Same eyes. Same crooked smile. He'd ghosted me after one date. No message. No warning. I remembered thinking he'd been made up in a dream. And now he'd returned. Different name. Same act. I realized then, I hadn't been the only one. And I wouldn't be the last. I shouldn't have said yes. Even now I don't know why I did. I wasn't the type to go hiking with strangers, especially not someone I'd only known online for a few weeks. But there was something about Thorne. His messages were disarmingly kind, unpolished in a way that felt real. He didn't pepper me with emojis or empty compliments. He asked strange questions, told me stories about his childhood in the hills, said things like, "People forget that the woods see more than they say." I thought it was poetic. I thought he was just eccentric. We met through a niche hiking forum. He'd posted a thread about underrated Appalachian trails without tourists, and I commented that I liked the solitude of lesser-known paths. He messaged me, and we began talking about books, music, and hiking mishaps. He sent photos, blurry selfies on trailheads, boots muddied to the laces, forests with trees bent at odd angles. I told myself this was harmless. So when he suggested we meet up to hike a trail called Hollow's End, I hesitated, but curiosity won. He said it was beautiful, untouched, that hardly anyone went there anymore. It used to be a settler path, he wrote, but no one remembers it now. That's what makes it special. I told a friend where I'd be. I shared my location. I packed pepper spray and a folding knife, told myself I was being safe. Hollow's End wasn't listed on any official trail maps. He gave me GPS coordinates instead. The trailhead was off a cracked back road lined with rusting mailboxes and empty barns. I got there first. The parking area was just a dirt clearing beside a rotting wooden sign that simply read, Hollow's End. I nearly turned back right then, but I didn't. Thorne showed up 10 minutes later in a battered green Subaru that looked like it belonged to a survivalist. He stepped out of the car with a quiet smile and a backpack slung over one shoulder. He was taller than I expected. Thinner too. He wore old hiking boots, cargo pants, and a gray hoodie that looked like it had seen better days. His black hair was tied back, and his eyes were a startling shade of pale amber, almost yellow in the sunlight. "Ready?" he asked, and we began. The trail started out normal enough. Crunching leaves underfoot, the smell of pine and soil, birdsong in the distance. Thorne walked ahead of me with a confident, deliberate stride, occasionally pointing out things I would have missed. A cluster of mushrooms shaped like teeth, a tree with claw marks. "You come out here often?" I asked. He gave a small nod. "It's quiet. No one else comes out this far." "Not anymore." "Why not?" He paused. "They say the trail's cursed." I laughed nervously, assuming he was joking. "They do," he said, still walking. "Old settler legend. They say the forest doesn't like to lose what it finds." I stopped laughing. About an hour in, the trail narrowed. The trees grew denser, the air colder. There were no trail markers, no signs, no sound beyond our footsteps and the occasional creak of branches above. I noticed that the birdsong had stopped. Thorne didn't mention it. He just kept walking. That's when I saw the first one. A wooden plank nailed to a tree. The words were burned into the surface, not written. "Turn back." I stopped. "Did you see this?" I asked, pointing. Thorne glanced at it and shrugged. "Old prank, probably. Teens come out here sometimes." But I didn't buy it. The sign didn't look old. The edges weren't weathered. The bark around the nail was fresh. Someone had put it there recently. We kept walking. Then came another. "You shouldn't be here." Thorne walked past it without a glance. I followed, but the dread in my chest was growing. The ground became uneven. Roots twisted out like veins, and the trees leaned inward, as if they were bending to watch us. The light dimmed, and it wasn't just the clouds. It was like the forest itself was swallowing the sky. I tried to make a joke to cut the tension. "Do you know where we're going?" Thorne stopped, turned to me slowly. "There's a clearing," he said. "You'll want to see it." There was something in his voice I didn't like. Too calm, too rehearsed. We reached the clearing 20 minutes later. It was an oval-shaped patch of dead grass surrounded by trees that grew in a perfect circle. No underbrush, no sound, just silence so thick it felt like cotton in my ears. Scattered around the clearing were more signs, some nailed to trees, others stuck in the ground, all with messages burned into them. "No one leaves. Stay still. They'll understand soon enough." One sign was half buried in the dirt. I knelt to read it. "Sarah." My name. My breath caught in my throat. I stood and turned to Thorne. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me. "You brought me here," I said. "Why?" His expression didn't change. "I told you. It's a special place." My legs trembled. I backed away slowly. "I'm leaving." He didn't argue. Didn't move to stop me. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The forest warped around me. The trail was gone. Every path looked the same. Trees with identical knots and splits. I ran until my lungs burned. I tripped, fell, scrambled up again. And then I saw it. A figure ahead of me. Not Thorne. Taller. Gaunt. Skin like ash bark. It stood motionless, watching. I backed away, turned, ran in another direction. Another figure. And another. They stood at the edges of vision. Never moving. Never speaking. I ran until I saw the trailhead. My car. I didn't stop. I jumped in, locked the doors, and sped away, tires spraying gravel. In the rearview mirror, I saw Thorne standing in the clearing, just beyond the trees, smiling. I filed a police report. They found Hollow's End, but the trail didn't match my description. There was no clearing, no signs, no name burned into the ground. The police said it was likely a misunderstanding. Maybe I got turned around, hallucinated from stress or dehydration. I know what I saw, but it gets worse. 3 weeks later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Me, standing in the clearing. Behind me, barely visible in the tree-line, was a figure. My back was turned, but the expression on my face was frozen in time. Fear. And on the back of the photo, written in scorched letters, "You came back." His name was Ren. We met at a friend of a friend's engagement party, which I almost didn't attend. It had been raining all day, one of those long, gray soaks that makes everything feel heavier than it should. I showed up late, parked 3 blocks away, and was already regretting it when I stepped inside and saw all the smiling couples and wine glasses balanced on fingertips. Ren stood near the fireplace, alone, holding a glass of champagne like it was unfamiliar. He had that look people get when they're trying to appear relaxed, but are really scanning everyone in the room. I noticed him noticing me. He smiled first. He was charming. Not in the slick, rehearsed way most men are, but in a quiet, studied way. His voice was low and warm, and when he asked questions, he listened carefully, nodding like my words had weight. We talked about books. He loved Don DeLillo, which I pretended to remember more of, and music, and the strange feeling of being in rooms where you don't quite belong. He said he'd only known the groom for a few months. Work connections, he said, but I'm glad I came. He asked for my number before I left, and I gave it to him, partly because I felt seen, partly because I didn't want to go home feeling like nothing had changed. We texted for a week. He wasn't overly persistent, just present, thoughtful. He'd send me songs to listen to, articles he thought I might like. One night, he sent a blurry photo of a carousel horse and said, "This reminded me of something you said about childhood. Don't know why." And then he asked if I wanted to go for a walk. "Somewhere quiet," he said, "just to talk." I agreed. We met at Briarcliff Park, a massive, forested sprawl just outside the city. It used to be a private estate, back in the early 1900s, and still had crumbling stone benches and moss-covered gazebos scattered between the trees. It was the kind of place that felt like it had too many memories, some of which didn't belong to the living. The sun was beginning to set when I arrived. The sky was a pale purple, and the leaves were brittle and dry, crunching underfoot with every step. Ren was waiting near the entrance, wearing a wool coat and gloves, holding 2 paper cups of tea. "Figured it might get cold," he said, handing me a cup. We began to walk. It started easily enough. He asked about my week, and I told him about a project at work that had gone sideways. He laughed at the right moments, offered sympathetic nods. He told me he'd been freelance editing historical manuscripts, obscure stuff mostly, and liked it because it let him live in forgotten time. I told him that was the most poetic thing I'd heard in weeks. He looked pleased, but only briefly. We reached a long, winding path that led to a small pond. The water was still. The surface was scattered with leaves, and the air smelled faintly of wet bark and something else I couldn't quite place. We stood there in silence for a moment. Then I noticed him looking past me. His entire posture shifted, like someone had pressed pause. I turned to follow his gaze. A woman in a red coat was walking slowly along the far edge of the pond. Her hair was dark, tied back. She moved with a kind of float to her step, like she wasn't fully grounded. She didn't look at us. Didn't even seem to notice we were there. "Do you know her?" I asked. Ren didn't answer. He was still staring, eyes locked on her like she was a flicker of something he didn't trust to be real. "Ren." He blinked and looked away quickly. "Sorry. No. Just thought she looked familiar." I watched him for a moment. His hands were trembling slightly, his tea forgotten. Something flickered across his face. Guilt? Recognition? Dread? "Are you okay?" He smiled, too quickly. "Yeah. Just weird vibe. You know how sometimes a place feels off all of a sudden?" I nodded slowly. But the air had changed. The temperature had dipped. I could feel it in my teeth. We continued walking, but his mood had shifted. He was quieter now, glancing over his shoulder more often. Once, he stopped completely and turned around like he'd heard something behind us. "Are you sure you didn't know her?" I asked again. He hesitated. "She looked like someone I used to know," he said eventually. "A long time ago." "An ex?" He didn't answer. I let it go. We looped through the park for another 20 minutes. By the time we reached the parking lot, it was dark. The trees cast long, crooked shadows, and the only sound was the soft tick of cooling engines. He walked me to my car and thanked me for coming. "I'd like to see you again," he said. I nodded. "I'd like that too." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I drove home with the radio on low and the windows barely cracked, trying to shake the strange weight that had settled in my chest. The next day, I looked him up online. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe just to confirm he existed outside of that night. What I didn't expect was the obituary. It was dated 3 years ago. Elise Marin, 28, found deceased in Briarcliff Park. The article said she'd fallen into the pond. that it was ruled an accidental drowning, though the details were murky. She had no history of mental illness, no signs of struggle. The article included a photo. She was wearing the same red coat. My stomach lurched. I scrolled down. There was a quote from a close friend, someone who had been with her that night. His name, Ren Elric. Same spelling, same face. A slightly younger version, but unmistakable. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't know what to do. I tried to call him, but the number was suddenly disconnected. I drove to Briarcliff Park 2 days later. I walked the same trail, stopped at the same pond. There was a small plaque now, half hidden under moss. It read, "In memory of Elise Marin. Loved. Missed. Never alone." I looked around. No red coat. No footsteps. Just the wind and the hush of water. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard a knock at my door. Soft. Rhythmic. I didn't move. Another knock. I crept to the peephole. No one was there, but on the doormat was a paper cup of tea. Still warm. The lid had a name written on it. Mine. I met Anthony at a dinner party where no one ate dinner. It was one of those events hosted by people who don't believe in chairs. Everyone was standing, holding plates of olives and wine glasses, talking about things they didn't quite understand. Someone was giving an impromptu lecture about the ethics of AI. Another was explaining ayahuasca like they'd invented it. Anthony was leaning against a bookshelf, sipping mezcal and nodding politely at a woman who was describing her third Ayurvedic cleanse. He caught my eye and smiled, a slow, deliberate curve that said, "Finally, someone else who sees through this." I walked over. I wish I hadn't. He introduced himself with a handshake and a quote. "We're all just stories we tell ourselves. I prefer to revise mine in real time." I should have walked away then, but I didn't, because I'm a sucker for well-phrased nonsense. He asked what I did for work. I told him. He said he was between projects, which turned out to mean he gave talks at boutique retreats about interpersonal liberation. When I asked what that meant, he said, "Helping people unlearn the prison of monogamy." I laughed. He didn't. "I'm serious," he said. "Most people don't love. They possess." I waited for the punchline. It never came. Instead, he launched into a philosophy that unraveled like a manifesto he'd practiced in front of a mirror. "Love," he said, "should be expansive, not restrictive. Most relationships are built on fear, fear of loss, fear of being alone, fear of someone else having what you think is yours." I sipped my drink. "So you're poly?" He shook his head. "That word's been diluted by people who just want to sleep around. I'm post-monogamous." I asked what that meant. He smiled like I'd asked a child's question. "It means I don't expect exclusivity. I expect honesty. If you want to connect with someone else, tell me. If I want to, I'll tell you. No secrets. No ownership. Just presence." It was slick. It was rehearsed. But it was also not entirely wrong. I'd been in relationships where jealousy ruled every decision. I'd seen people implode over imagined betrayals. There was something appealing about the clarity he described. Until he kept talking. We ended up going out the following week. Drinks at a moody jazz bar, the kind of place where the drinks cost more than the rent I paid in college. He wore black on black. He smelled like bergamot and some kind of philosophical arrogance. The conversation started well. He asked thoughtful questions, listened, quoted philosophers like he'd swallowed a syllabus. But then the subject turned, inevitably, back to his ideology. "I don't do titles," he said. "Labels are just boxes we build, so we can feel safe inside them." "Okay," I said, "but sometimes labels help people know where they stand." "That's the problem," he replied. "People want certainty. But certainty is an illusion. The only truth is change." It sounded good, until you realized it meant he'd never be accountable for anything. He told me about a woman he was deeply connected to who'd gotten upset when he'd slept with someone else. "She said I betrayed her," he said. "But how can you betray what you never claimed?" I stared at him. "Did she know you were seeing other people?" "She should have," he answered, "if she'd been listening. I'm guessing she didn't take that well. She cried for 3 hours, he said, looking faintly bored. But pain is just resistance." I took a long sip of my drink. He leaned in. "Most people aren't ready for real intimacy. They want a contract, not a connection." I said nothing. He asked if I wanted to come back to his place. I declined. He smiled, unfazed. "No pressure. I just like to offer space." We ended up seeing each other again. I can't say why. Maybe because I wanted to understand him. Maybe because I thought I could argue him into sincerity. Maybe because I was tired of dates that were all surface and no fire. Anthony had plenty of fire, but none of it warmed you. He treated every conversation like a debate, every emotion like a theory to be unpacked. When I told him I'd had a rough day at work, he replied, "You're choosing to suffer. You can opt out." When I mentioned I'd deleted a dating app because it was making me anxious, he said, "That's just attachment trauma. You're externalizing your self-worth." When I told him I was starting to like him, tentatively, clumsily, he said, "That's sweet. But remember, liking is not the same as needing." He never asked how I felt the next day. He never followed up on anything. His approach to intimacy was like a scientist observing bacteria, curious, detached, untouched by the mess of it. I should have ended it, but I didn't, because I kept thinking, maybe he's right. Maybe I'm just conditioned to expect emotional tracking and reassurance. Maybe I'm the problem. That's the danger of people like Anthony. They don't tell you not to feel. They tell you you're feeling wrong. The last time I saw him, we were at a gallery opening. He knew an artist who painted women without faces. They're about projection, he explained. How we cast our desires onto people instead of seeing them. I looked at the paintings and thought, that's you. You want to be seen as radical, enlightened, free. But you don't see anyone else. Later, while I was looking at a sculpture, his hand brushed my lower back. I turned to find him talking to a woman with short green hair and a tattoo of a crow on her neck. He introduced her as someone extraordinary. I said hello. 10 minutes later, they were gone. He didn't text that night. The next morning, I got a message. "Last night was beautiful. Hope you felt free." I didn't reply. He sent another. "You seem disappointed." "That's okay. Disappointment is just a teacher." I blocked his number. Months later, a friend of mine matched with him on a dating app. She sent me a screenshot. Same quote, same smile, same philosophy. She asked if I knew him. I said, "He'll make you feel like you're the one who doesn't get it. But you do. Trust that." She unmatched. I still think about Anthony sometimes. Not because I miss him, but because he taught me something. Not what he intended. He taught me that detachment isn't wisdom. That freedom isn't the absence of care. That relationships aren't cages, but they do require staying. And that someone who refuses to be claimed may also refuse to be held. I didn't want to go. That's the truth. I'd just gotten out of something that wasn't even a relationship. Not really, just months of uneven texting and wrong timing. But it had left me brittle. I had no interest in hearing someone else's stories, or pretending mine weren't still bleeding at the edges. But my coworker, Nell, insisted. She said she had a friend, well, a friend of a friend, who was funny, smart, and emotionally literate. That last one made me laugh out loud. I should have known then. His name was Kalen. He suggested a jazz bar called Mothglass, tucked into an alley behind a closed-down bookbindery. It was one of those places where the air always smelled like clove cigarettes and old leather couches. I got there early, nervous in a way I hadn't been in years, and sat at the bar nursing a glass of watered-down mezcal. He arrived 5 minutes late. Tall, pale, hair the color of burnt straw, a little messy in a way someone probably told him was charming once. He wore a black peacoat and a scarf that looked like it had survived a decade of winters. His eyes were green, but not the inviting kind, more like the kind of green you find in pond water left too long in shadow. Still, he smiled easily. "Thank me for coming." Hopped up on the stool beside mine like it was nothing. "Raya, right?" he asked. "Right." We ordered drinks. The first half hour was fine. Basic questions. What do you do? What do you like? What brings you here? He told me he worked in archival restoration, old documents, mostly. Said he liked things that had been forgotten. "I guess I just like things that outlived their purpose," he said, half laughing. "They feel closer to the truth." I nodded, unsure what that meant, but intrigued. Then he asked me if I'd ever been in love. I blinked. That's a big question for a first drink. He smiled. "I think it's the only question." I gave a cautious answer. "Yes, once. Maybe twice." "And you?" That's when it began. The first story came out slow. A woman named Celia. He met her at a film screening. She wore red gloves and quoted Russian poets. He loved her instantly. She left him after 2 years. She said I was too heavy, he said, sipping his drink. That I pulled her down. I tried to nod sympathetically, to move the conversation forward, but he kept going. Then came Ariane. She was a sculptor. He described her laugh, her apartment, her habit of humming when she was anxious. She left him too. She said he was too observant, that he saw things she didn't want to be seen. It was uncomfortable, but not unbearable yet. I told myself he was just being open. People process in different ways. But then came the others, one after another. Names I couldn't keep up with. Details that didn't belong in a bar conversation. One had a miscarriage. Another tried to set their apartment on fire. One disappeared for 3 weeks and came back with a shaved head and a new name. He told me about the time he found a note in someone's coat pocket that said, "You're not the only one." He told me how that felt. "I still have the note," he said softly. "I keep it in my wallet. To remind me." I stared at him. "Kaylin, I know," he cut in quickly. "I know this is a lot. Too much. I always do this. I always think if I just say it out loud, the weight will lift. It doesn't." "No," he whispered. "It just grows legs." I laughed nervously. "That's poetic." He didn't laugh with me. "I used to write songs," he said, "but they all turned into letters I never sent." The bar felt suddenly colder. The jazz in the background blurred into something dissonant. I looked over his shoulder and could see the reflection of us in the mirror behind the bar. He looked smaller in the glass, like he was sinking into the stool. "Do you want to order food or?" "I haven't even told you about Lyrian." I didn't want to know about Lyrian. I wanted to go home. I wanted to take a shower and scrub the stories off my skin. "She was the one," he said. "I don't mean that in the cliché way. I mean she was the one who saw all the others and didn't flinch. She stayed. Until she didn't." "What happened?" He looked at me for a long time before answering. "She stopped answering her phone. I went to her place. It was empty. Just a mattress and a single chair. But on the chair, she'd left a recording. I waited. What did it say?" He smiled. Not sadly. Not bitterly. Just emptily. She said, "You collect women like tombstones." I didn't know what to say. "I think that's unfair," he added. "I never meant to bury anyone." I stood up. "Kaylin, I think I'm going to head out." He looked surprised, like he'd genuinely forgotten this was a date and not some confessional. "Oh, of course," he said. "Sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's fine. Just, yeah. Take care." I left without waiting for him to stand. Outside, the air was damp and heavy. I didn't look back. But that night, I dreamed of him. In the dream, I was walking through a cemetery. But instead of names, each tombstone had a photo. Women. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. All different ages, different styles, different smiles. But they were all looking at me. And Kaylin was there, sitting cross-legged on the grass with a notebook in his lap. He looked up and said, "I remember all of them." I didn't respond. He turned a page. "I'm remembering you now." I woke up sweating. I told myself it was just a bad date, that I was projecting, that my own unresolved stuff had twisted the evening into something it wasn't. But then the email came. 2 days later. No subject line. No sender name. Just the message. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I just wanted to be known. Even for an hour. Even by a stranger." I didn't reply. But a week later, I got another. "I think you were the kindest one. You didn't flinch as much." That meant something. I blocked the address. A month passed. Then one morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed, "Raya, I hope you're well. I've been thinking about that night. You were the only one who didn't look away when I said her name. I think that means something. I hope you're not lonely. Or if you are, I hope you're the kind of lonely that builds, not breaks. Kaylin." There was no return address. No sign of how he found where I lived. I moved apartments 2 weeks later. I don't use the same name on dating apps anymore. Sometimes when I walk past people in cafes, I think I hear him talking. Not to anyone in particular, just talking softly, like he's whispering memories into the air. And every so often, I hear a name I recognize. Celia, Ariane, Lyrian. And then I hear mine. And I keep walking, because I don't want to end up as another stone in his mouth. His name was Kale. We met through an app one rarely used, during a week I barely remember. I'd been working 12-hour shifts and sleeping through most of my weekends. A friend convinced me to try dating again, just to break the rhythm of work and silence. I downloaded the app, swiped on a few profiles, and matched with him the same evening. Kale's photos were black and white. He had that quiet, artistic look, slightly tousled hair, a faint scar near his eyebrow, and a crooked smile that looked more like a secret. His bio was short. "I like people who don't smile when they're supposed to." I didn't know what that meant, but I messaged him anyway. He responded quickly. Polite, thoughtful, and sometimes cryptic. He recommended books I'd never heard of, and told me he liked wandering antique stores alone. We talked for 3 days before he asked if I wanted to meet. I agreed. We chose a quiet bar called Elliot's Hollow, tucked into the corner of downtown, where low lighting and soft jazz made everyone feel like they were in a movie scene. I arrived 5 minutes early. He was already there, sitting at the back, sipping something dark from a heavy glass. He stood when he saw me. His coat was too thin for the weather, but he didn't seem to notice. Up close, his eyes were a strange shade, too pale to be brown, too stormy to be hazel. He smelled faintly of cedarwood and cold air. "Ria?" he asked, tilting his head. "Yes," I said, and offered a small smile. He smiled back, but only briefly. We talked for 2 hours. He asked strange questions, not inappropriate, just unexpected. "Do you dream in color? Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you were being watched, even when no one was there? Do you believe people can leave parts of themselves behind in the places they've lived?" I told him I wasn't sure about any of those things. He nodded like he respected that, like uncertainty was preferable to false conviction. At the end of the night, he offered to walk me to my car. I hesitated, but agreed. He didn't touch me, didn't ask for a hug or a kiss. Just smiled and said, "I hope you sleep well tonight." I drove home feeling unsettled, not in a bad way. Just watched. The next morning, I found a message from him. "You looked like someone trying not to disappear last night." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't respond. He didn't message again that day or the next. A week passed. Then I found the note. It was in my mailbox. No envelope. Folded neatly, pressed flat. My name was typed across the front, just Ria, in a serif font like something from a typewriter. I opened it. I know how hard it is to be seen. Sometimes I think we only exist when someone is looking at us. I'm still looking. There was no signature. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't even from him. Maybe it was part of a local art project. People left weird things in mailboxes all the time, right? Another week passed. I didn't hear from Kale. I thought it was over. Then I found the second note. This one was slipped under my apartment door. Same paper. Same font. You lock your door twice. Once out of habit. The second time because of what you've imagined. My stomach dropped. I hadn't told anyone about that habit. I checked the locks. Nothing was broken. No signs of forced entry. Just that sheet of paper, folded cleanly, like it had been placed there with care. I blocked his number. Deleted the app. I didn't know what else to do. The next night, I heard a knock at the door. Soft. Deliberate. I didn't move. After a minute, it stopped. In the morning, there was no one outside. But tucked between my doormat and the tile floor was another note. You're most beautiful when you're scared. I called the police. They came. Took a report. Asked if I had any enemies. Any exes with unresolved feelings. I told them about Kale. Showed them the messages, the notes. They said they'd look into it. That night, I slept with a knife under my pillow. 2 days later, another note arrived. This time, it was taped to my bathroom mirror. That's what broke me. I hadn't left the window open. The door had been locked. I hadn't heard anything. But there it was, in the center of the glass, dead center at eye level. I like this version of you. The one that doesn't pretend. I packed a bag and left that night. I stayed at a friend's place across the city. Didn't tell anyone where I'd gone. I turned off my phone. Changed my email. Got a new number. I didn't go outside for 3 days. On the 4th night, I got a text from an unknown number. You can shut the blinds, but I still know how you move. I didn't know how he found me. I didn't want to know. I moved again. This time, I left the city entirely. Changed jobs. Rented a studio apartment under a different name. I became a ghost of my former self. I didn't date. I didn't engage. I didn't let anyone know where I lived. For 6 months, there was silence. And then, last week, I woke up to find the mirror in my apartment fogged, though I hadn't used the shower. In the center of the glass, written with a fingertip. I never stopped looking. His name was Idris. We matched on an app one barely remembered downloading. I'd been in a strange mood that week, tired of the silence, tired of the scrolling. His profile was unassuming. A single photo, him in an oversized coat, leaning against a brick wall, looking away from the camera. His bio said, "Asking the right questions is more intimate than touching." I should have known better. We met for coffee at a place called Clarity House. Minimalist furniture, white walls, windows that let in too much light. He was already seated when I arrived, sipping black coffee from a ceramic cup, no phone in sight. "Zara?" he asked, standing to shake my hand. His palm was dry and warm. "Yes," I said, and sat across from him. From the start, something about him felt fixed, as if he was fully present in a way most people weren't. He never broke eye contact. He didn't fidget. He didn't seem bored or distracted or waiting for his turn to speak. At first, it was refreshing. Then the question started. "What's the worst thing your parents ever said to you?" I blinked. "That's a little intense for a first date." He tilted his head, smiling faintly. "You don't have to answer. I just like to know what shaped people." I shrugged it off. I'd had worse openers. We kept talking. He asked where I grew up, what my childhood bedroom looked like, the name of my first pet. I told him, carefully editing as I went. When I asked what he did for work, he said, "I freelance. Mostly data mapping." I didn't know what that meant. He avoided talking about himself. Every question I asked came back to me. "Do you believe in fate? What's the last lie you told someone you love? Would you rather be watched or forgotten?" That one made me pause. "I don't know," I said. "Neither sounds great." He nodded slowly. "Most people say that, but you hesitated." After an hour, I suggested we go for a walk. The coffee shop felt too bright, too exposed. Outside, the sun was low, painting everything in soft gold. We walked without direction, down side streets, and into quieter parts of the neighborhood. He asked more questions. "How often do you cry? What password do you use most often?" I stared at him. "Kidding," he said quickly. "Just seeing if you were still paying attention." But I wasn't laughing. We reached a small park with a narrow path that wound through a patch of trees. I slowed my steps, suddenly unsure if I wanted to go deeper into the shade with him. "I think I'll head back," I said. "Early morning tomorrow." He didn't argue, just nodded again, calm as ever. "I enjoyed our conversation," he said. "Not many people are honest." I forced a smile. "Thanks." As I turned to leave, I noticed a car idling across the street. Matte black. Windows tinted too dark to see through. It wasn't moving, but the engine was running. I glanced back at Idris. He was still standing there, hands in his coat pockets, watching me. I walked home quickly, checking over my shoulder more than once. The car didn't follow. At least, not that I could tell. That night, I didn't sleep well. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. "You looked beautiful when you smiled at the pigeons." I hadn't told anyone about that. It had happened after the date, on my walk home. I'd paused near the fountain, laughed as a bird waddled toward my feet. I blocked the number. 2 days later, I received another message. "Your door makes a soft creak when you lock it, like it's whispering." I checked the locks. Nothing looked tampered with. I installed a new deadbolt and bought a camera for the hallway. But the messages kept coming. "Do you ever feel like you're being studied? The green sweater suits you. It makes you look softer. I don't think you even know what you're afraid of." I called the police. They took a report. I showed them the messages, mentioned the date. They asked if I'd ever invited him to my home, given him my address. I hadn't. They said there wasn't much they could do unless he entered the property or made a direct threat. I started taking different routes home. I wiped my social media. I switched to private accounts, changed my passwords. Then one evening, I noticed the black car again. Parked across the street. Lights off. Engine silent this time. I didn't go outside. The next morning, a package was waiting at my door. No return address. Inside was a flash drive and a neatly folded sheet of paper. The note read, "It's not stalking if it's a study." I didn't plug in the drive. I took it to the police. They confiscated it and told me they'd add it to the file. I asked if they'd found anything on Idris. "There's no record of anyone by that name matching your description," the officer said. "No social media, no official ID, nothing in the local database." I stopped going out alone. 6 days later, someone left a Polaroid on my windowsill. It showed me sitting in my kitchen reading. Taken from outside through the glass. I'd been alone. I moved apartments 3 days later. New locks. New number. No forwarding address. No more dating apps.